Hi guys, welcome to the German grip lesson. Today we're gonna work on our wrist motion and our German grip in order to benefit speed and taking advantage of the rebound only using our wrist. What usually happens is that we tend to start working with an arm motion from slow tempos, and while we increase the speed we switch to a wrist motion only, and then as we feel like we get to the limit of our wrist speed, we start helping ourselves with fingers. This is a very common situation that I saw and I've been facing for a while. And so the way I worked on this to improve my wrist motion was basically to force myself, when I would get to the point of limit of speed of my wrist, instead of helping myself with the fingers, I would figure out a way to always keep the wrist motion going. So instead of opening my hand, I would keep the hand in contact without choking the stick, but only in contact, so that I was forced actually to use my wrist motion. And in this way I improved my wrist motion speed, and that benefit everything else, because of course if my limit of wrist motion is 200 bpm or 220 bpms, and then with the help of my finger, let's say I get 20 bpms more, that will take me to 240, and that means that that's the maximum speed that I can play at. If instead I will work on my wrist motion and bring it to, let's say, 240, then with the help of my fingers I'm gonna still have that 20 bpms more, so that's gonna be 240 plus 20, which means 260. That's why I wanted to work on my wrist motion so much, and while I was working it, I figured out little details that really made a difference for me, and so now we're gonna go through all these little details. So the first thing I've worked on was how to actually hold the stick in my hand, so the grip itself, and we're talking about the German grip right now. So this part of the hand looks upwards and not laterally as in the French grip. So one of the common mistakes that I see and that I used to do is that I was holding, and my main fulcrum point was between the index and thumb fingers, and while I would bounce the stick I would start to feel a lot of stress here, and sometimes I would also find myself working with like the pinky finger raised in this way, which means it's not working at all, and this gave a lot of work on this area of my hand, and that was causing stress. And as I would stress my hand, I would choke or get stiff, and that would prevent me to move my wrist, to have a wrist motion, because I had like all these muscles contract, so it was impossible for me to do a relaxed wrist motion. So I started from literally holding the stick with only these three fingers and then laying these two on the stick. Why did this benefit my German grip? Basically, if we think of the fact that we have 5 fingers that we can take advantage of in holding the stick, and we only use 2, that means that all the work is divided 50% on the thumb and 50% on the index finger, and these 3 fingers are barely doing anything, which is a waste. Instead, if I hold the stick with these fingers and then I lay these 2, it means that the work is divided between 5 fingers, and so each finger has 20% of work, and that of course takes a lot of pressure away from only one part of the hand. In this way I found myself way more relaxed than what I was doing before, and this was very helpful also to understand if I was only using the wrist motion or if I was helping myself with fingers too, because holding the stick in this way will prevent you from using the fingers and helping yourself with the fingers. So if I always keep these 3 fingers in contact, there's no way that I can actually help myself with the fingers also. Or if you find a way, it's better for you not to do it because you want to work to improve your wrist motion speed and not to cheat on yourself and help yourself with other parts of your hand or of your body to make this happen, okay? So once we do this, we will be forced to isolate the wrist from the rest of our arm. So we really want to make sure that the forearm is not involved in this motion, and neither the fingers, so only wrist motion. At this point we have to understand that we can also take advantage of the rebound to improve our speed with the wrist motion. And this is very important because if we think of raising the stick every time, it's gonna give us hard times, it's gonna slow us down, because of course it's more difficult to keep lifting and then pushing down the stick rather than just following the stick back, because the rebound pushes the stick up and then pushing the stick back down. Okay, so learning how to follow and how to accept the rebound with the wrist only is very important. A lot of times this happens where after the stroke we stop the rebound of the stick, which means that then we have to raise the stick again. Or this happened where we open the hand and so the wrist is not really moving. We see the stick coming back up, but then it's actually the opening of the hand that allows the stick to go back up, and we're not following the stick with our wrist. So let's pay attention that what we do, it's actually this thing, and we don't stop the stick or open the hand. So the rebound, it's a very important thing at this point because it will help us to make this wrist motion happen, because it will pull the stick back up and we will only have to focus on pushing down and then coming back up as fast as possible. So working on our reaction of the wrist. So as the stick hits the surface, it wants to immediately come back, and we have to just work on the up motion as fast as we can. The faster we are in doing this, the faster we will play, because the earlier we will be ready for another stroke. So the more strokes we play in a certain amount of time, the faster we're playing basically. So when I do this, I focus all my concentration on coming back. Another factor that really made a difference was the dynamic at which I play when I use the wrist motion. So of course the slower we go, the more space we have to do this motion, but then the faster we start to play. Time and space being connected, we want to have less space between the tip of the stick and the pad to have less time between each stroke, so more speed. Okay, so if let's say we can play at this high at 150 BPMs, we won't be able to do the same at 250, of course, unless we're not machines, but unfortunately we're not. So we have to deal with the dynamic. So the faster we will go, the lower our dynamic will have to be. We have to deal with the dynamic. We have to find a compromise, and that's a choice that you will make in time, based on the way you want to play. If you want to be a hard hitter, you won't maybe be able to go too fast, but you will always have a very high volume, a very high dynamic of your playing. Instead, if you want to be a little bit faster and maybe more of a speed drummer, that means that you have to learn to control the dynamic and not just go all the way back as much as you can, but you will have to choose the dynamic based on the speed that you want to play at. Okay, let's see two workouts that we can do to improve our wrist motion. The first one, we will work more on the first 4 strokes of the hand, which will allow us to learn how to play the first stroke with our arm motion, because the arm motion, it's always better to start with an arm motion injection rather than with the wrist straight away. The arm motion is a little bit easier, and we just have to leave our arm fall, and once the stick hits the surface, we have to learn to follow the rebound, so the first stroke, with the wrist motion, and not just let the stick bounce back on its own, but actually follow it with our body. So this is the first workout, and we're going to play 4 strokes per hand in this way. So again, in this way, we will work on the first part, so the injection part of our wrist motion. So for example, if we have to do a single stroke roll, we will be able to just start the single stroke, accepting the rebound, and then maintaining the rebound for as long as we will need to. Or if we have to start a blast beat or whatever, we will have to play. It's just to educate our brain to have this type of approach every time it faces this situation. So we start a blast beat, a single stroke roll, or whatever involves a wrist motion, and it is educated to just accept the rebound following the stick back, instead of you having to think about doing that while you're playing, which is going to be impossible when you'll be in a situation where you have so many things to think about, like playing in a band, playing a live show, having the click tracks, all the situation, being in the studio, all the situation that's surrounding you will make it harder for you to only concentrate on your wrist for that fraction of movement every time you have to use the wrist motion. So in this way, it will just become natural. It will just become a muscular memory that every time that this happens, the wrist will follow the stick back up. The second workout will be more focused on the dynamics, so on educating ourselves to play at different dynamics based on the speed that we're playing at. So we will play one hand at a time, quarter notes, triplets, and 8 notes, and we will use a different dynamic for each speed. So quarter notes, we will go all the way back up with the stick, triplets we will be a little bit lower, and 8 notes will be even lower. Then we will do the same thing with our hands unison, and then with our hands alternated, which of course will become 8 notes, 6 tuplets, 16 notes. So let's see how this will work. We can also play the same type of exercises and do the same workouts with heavier sticks, like for example these ones, which are in aluminum, which are way heavier than regular wood sticks, or marching band sticks, or whatever type of stick that it's heavy and you can really feel the difference from the one that you usually use. And we don't want to work this to become more powerful or stronger, but we want to just learn how to deal with the rebound better than what we do with the regular wood sticks. So if we will feel the weight of these sticks, we will understand that we're doing something wrong, like lifting the sticks, for example, because it means that we're not taking advantage of the rebound. Instead, if the rebound pushes the stick back up, we won't ever feel the weight of the stick. So let's see how these two workouts work with heavier sticks. So as we can see, I used almost the same speeds. Actually, for the second workouts, it was always 220 BPMs for the first time and the second times, and nothing really changes. Actually, I felt a little bit more comfortable with the heavier stick because being heavier, there's more rebound. So it kind of works the opposite way of what I usually hear, where people tend to use lighter sticks to go faster. But then everybody will have a different feeling on this, so you will see how it works, and it's actually good to try and use lighter sticks and heavier sticks, because maybe you will change your approach and you will find a new way, a new approach for you to play drums. Another little suggestion that I give you, or another feeling that I have when I play this, the wrist motion, is that whenever I feel that the stick is in contact with my thumb and pinky finger, and all the other fingers are laying on the stick, I automatically feel that my hand relaxes. So try to concentrate on this and try to see if this happens for you also. The reason why this happens is because you're having the stick in contact with these two fingers really allows you, or really forces you to take advantage of all the hand and all the fingers, and so in this way you redistribute all the work between all the fingers instead of stopping at the ring finger or middle finger or index finger. So in this way we will benefit the wrist motion, and we will automatically benefit control, speed, power, and endurance. And for me, this was a very helpful approach and very helpful way to improve my speed. I sometimes play blast beats with my wrists only, which in my opinion gives a little bit more of power in the blast beat, and I have a little bit more volume while playing the blast beats, and for this reason I really like it. But also, of course, on fills on the toms, for example, where if you tune your toms a little bit low, they won't have the same rebound as the snare does, or usually still the floor toms never have the same rebound of a snare, and so having a good wrist motion helps me on playing on any kit. So whenever I'm on tour or whenever I play in festivals, I don't have any problems adapting myself to the kit that I find there, and also to keep a very high dynamic and volume also on the surfaces that don't have a lot of rebound. So have a good practice, and I'll see you next week with another lesson.